A lot of the reason people stay stuck on specific issues isn't because they lack discipline, willpower, or intelligence. It's actually because their understanding of the issue itself is limited. When your understanding of something is limited, your ability to work with said thing is also limited. The more clearly you understand something, the more consciously you can engage with, adjust, and influence it. Limited understandings create limited action, which in turn limit the results of the effort being applied. Precision creates leverage. This matters more than most people realize because the words you use shape how you think, and how you think and how you speak about yourself in your reality shapes your relationship with yourself and what your reality looks like. More importantly, what you believe to be true about yourself quietly dictates how you behave. So your words are not harmless. They actually carry quite a bit of weight. They install programming and limiting beliefs that dictate what life looks like for you individually and how you respond to what shows up. That's especially true when we talk about procrastination. The funny thing about procrastination is people say that they're being lazy, but the thing is most people never actually decided that they were lazy. They were told that they were lazy by their parents, by their teachers, by their peers, and by authority figures who saw an action and never bothered to even ask why it was there so consistently. The label becomes accepted as a fact and as an explanation and as a characteristic that they use to describe themselves and what effort looks like for them. This is damaging because whatever you believe yourself to be, your unconscious will behave accordingly. So if we're going to talk about procrastination, honestly, guys, we actually need to be very precise and point out some distinctions around it so your understanding of it can improve and maybe you can manipulate it a little bit better, right? So procrastination, for all intents and purposes, is the behavior of choosing an action or putting off completing the necessary tasks to complete a goal or meet a deadline. When we use this definition that I'm bringing up in this video, I'm strictly only defining the behavior itself. Everything else that we associate with the word with the behavior of procrastination actually only explains why the behavior exists in the first place or is being exhibited or is continuing. The productivity crowd isn't going to like hearing this, but laziness is not a behavior. Laziness is a state of mind. This distinction matters, and more specifically, laziness is a state in which a person desires to move, do, and exert effort as little as possible or not at all. It's the desire to rest, to conserve energy, to disengage, to do nothing. You can feel lazy, you can be in a lazy state, and you can even behave lazily, but laziness itself is not the behavior of procrastination. It is a description of the behavior of procrastination and how it is manifested. So here's the real issue with calling procrastination laziness. It doesn't actually explain anything. Lazy doesn't tell you when procrastination shows up. It doesn't tell you why it shows up. It doesn't even tell you what conditions trigger it or why it disappears under pressure. It doesn't explain why someone avoids a task for weeks and then suddenly performs when the stakes are high. The very fact that suddenly they can be productive means that laziness in its own right is once again a temporary state, and states are triggered by your thoughts and your feelings. Saying a person is lazy in it of itself. And when a label like lazy has already been accepted and integrated as something someone believes about themselves, it's no longer a description of something, of a passing feeling. It becomes unconscious programming. And from that point, all of your effort, all of the stress tolerance, and all of your choices begin formulating and being motivated by this programming. They're acted forth from this programming in the unconscious mind. Every time the word is used in regards to the individual that is affected by this programming, the programming and its implications, behavior or otherwise, are also reinforced. And every time they say it about themselves or make a joke about it, or when others use it to describe them, or when they use it to describe why they aren't doing something, it becomes a part of the rapport they've developed with their negative self-talk, and each repetition strengthens the same conditioned response and the behaviors that they're trying to change. The more that response is reinforced, the more likely it is easily able to activate when under stress, pressure, or the demands are too high. This is why awareness alone doesn't stop a behavior from repeating when you're triggered. Procrastination has often been defined as waiting. I'm going to just say it one more time. The definition of describing procrastination as waiting is lazy. Waiting implies nothing is required yet of you. Procrastination happens when action is required, the time to do so is limited, and instead of utilizing that time effectively, it's just kind of put off, knowing full well that whatever needs to be done on this agenda has to be done by whatever that deadline is. Waiting itself is a neutral act. It's neutral because there's no motive underneath the action, and there's no consequence of what happens next on your part as action. There's no pressure. You wait for your Uber driver to arrive. You wait for the food that you've got in the oven to be done. You wait your turn. You wait for the response to your email or your friend to call you back. Waiting is neutral. When you're waiting, your action has no impact on what's going to happen next in regards to the arrival of what you're waiting for. Procrastination is not neutral. The only neutrality involved in the procrastination is in the quote-unquote lack of action itself. The only passivity is in the lack of action itself. And how the decision to arrive at procrastinating is not neutral. Procrastination is not about avoiding work entirely. It's actually more about avoiding the stress that is a part of the work or the actions required to meet the goal by a certain deadline. Starting a task doesn't just require effort, it requires carrying the responsibility over time until it is done. And when you delay starting, you delay carrying that potential stress. But the thing is when you delay starting, you're not actually removing your stress. You're just postponing the stress and compounding the stress and making the pressure much higher than it needed to be. And so once that procrastination builds past a certain threshold, it's no longer pressure oriented, it's stress oriented. And then procrastination low-key turns into a stress response stemming from the avoidant stress response and the freeze stress response. Procrastination is not a neutral delay. When engaging with a task would require sustained pressure, responsibility, or effort over time, the unconscious mind sees this as too much and tries to avoid it as long as possible. And as this pressure builds, the avoidance turns into a freeze response when it becomes overwhelming. And then action is almost impossible to take until there's no more time left to put it off. This is not about indecision. This is not about resting. This is not about waiting. It's about avoiding stress and freezing, and how you express your avoidance of stress and freezing physically. So how does a deadline free people up of this procrastination stuff over time? Well, again, it creates pressure, which is basically your mental awareness that something needs to be done by you in a certain amount of time, or there's going to be some sort of consequence as a result of not doing it. And as that pressure accumulates, the cost of inaction rises. Failure stops being an abstract possibility that may or may not happen. The consequences of the actions become more real, and the option to keep delaying the action required to meet the deadline further narrows to the point to where there isn't any more. And then the cortisol spikes as the stress levels raise to a point. And then once they reach to a certain point, suddenly they are able to mobilize. Now, depending on how effective said person in procrastination mobilizes when this stress level sparks, sometimes the deadline is missed. Sometimes it's barely met. And sometimes it's knocked out pretty successfully, you know? And that's when people can kind of pat themselves on the back and get a little dopamine hit because, you know, they got a reward and they prove to themselves that they're competent and they're valuable. And see, look, I can do it. Look, I'm smart. I'm good at this. And it didn't even take me that much time to do it. You know, it's a dopamine hit that you have sort of taught yourself to associate with pulling things off at the last minute. When instead you could have been like, man, that was really unnecessary. I should have spaced that out a little bit more. So what winds up happening is this happens again and again and again, and you learn that this is the way to do this for you. And so what happens is the waiting to the last minute and producing under high stress becomes how you perceive this as the way that you do that, right? And instead of it being a problem that needs to be solved, it winds up becoming a required step in how action manifests for the individual that suffers from the ailment of procrastination. What's funny is after this happens enough time, people start to associate the reward with the story of all that stress that is accumulated from the short amount of time that they've given themselves to execute these actions. And they think to themselves, I work best under pressure and I thrive in chaos. Nothing could be more further from the truth. The reason being, guys, is because in order to thrive, it implies innately that there is a stable environment and that there is consistency and stability, right? You cannot thrive without stability and consistency. And chaos in its own right is disruption and entropy, which is the exact opposite of what is required to thrive. These two things cannot exist simultaneously in the same room at the same time. It doesn't work that way. I'm going to hurt your feelings when I tell you this, but nothing can truly thrive in chaos. Be with that as long as you need. I hope this breakdown of procrastination helps you guys, and it can help you sort of change some of these problems that you may be having with it. Okay? For those of you that are ready to break this pattern of procrastination and really change this behavior, I highly recommend you reach out, because this is something that I help people out with consistently and regularly, and I've gotten some great results from people in this capacity. If you're ready to do some of that work, you can schedule a consultation with me on my website, www.lionslighthtc.com. And if you are looking to maybe study this a little bit more and you want some more information on how this unconscious stuff works, I invite you to check out my free ebook. The link will be down below. The ebook is called 3 Reasons You're Still Struggling with Your Past Even After All That Therapy and Shadow Work. And if you liked the video and this was helpful for you and it helps you understand this procrastination stuff a little bit more, or if something resonated that you didn't quite notice about this topic or this problem prior, mention it in the comments. Let me know what helped you out. And if you know a procrastinator, share this with them. I'm sure they'll get some insight from it as well. All right, well, that's everything for this video today. Hit the subscribe button and follow me if you aren't already. There will be some more content in the future. Also, let me know if there's another topic that you'd like me to break down, and I will do that for you later. All right? Peace, everybody. I'll see you next time.